Right, today I want to talk about the European integration process. This is a process that's taken a long time. We've been doing it for 70 years and we're still nowhere near the finish. It is a process of 27 nations, now only 27, coming together and integrating into one juridical system. This integration is on different levels. We've seen economic integration. At the beginning there was more economic integration where you see a single market, harmonization of rules, single currency, etc. Then a political integration where you see the institutions emerge. You've got the Parliament, you've got the Commission, which could be called the government, the Council of Ministers, etc., the Justice, the Court of Justice. So there's this political union, but also a social and cultural union. There's a lot of exchange, there's a freedom of movement of people to go where they want and live where they want, marry, very easy to go from Italy to Germany and marry someone there and retire there, etc. So there's this social and cultural union, because cultural, we are joining in a community. We are creating a community of people, not many communities, but one with a shared culture, a shared identity, if you like. This is taking a long time. When I was young, the English knew nothing of French politics, of Italian lifestyle, etc. Now we have a very good idea of who the President of France is and who is present in the European Union. We have much more of a European news than a national news now. So it is taking a long time, but we're not really there. People still don't understand, who are the political parties in Europe, on the European level, in the Parliament. What do they stand for? What laws are we, fighting to have or not have? What is the European doing? The European Union doing? So this is a long process, and maybe we are going towards a kind of super state, where, like the United States of Europe, that in the Maastricht Treaty, it does state that we are in an ever closer union. So that is the objective stated in the founding treaties, the treaties which dictate, the European mission and how it works and what it is. So yes, and this is a European. This is a European Union. Europe is an area, isn't it? But the European Union is the organisation of some of these European states into this bigger entity, bigger organisation, social, economic, political and cultural organisation. So, and community. This is the integration process. There has been a disintegration process with Britain. Britain decided to leave Europe, the European Union, and its stated purpose was to become more global, to come out of Europe and then be free to really integrate into the world by itself. So this is a disintegration process and required a treaty. To bring all these countries together required a lot of treaties over many, many decades, and institutions built, etc., in these treaties. To disintegrate, to pull out of this process, needed another treaty. The United Kingdom triggered this process with a letter. According to the Lisbon Treaty, this was possible before the Lisbon Treaty. You couldn't even pull out of the European Union. Remember, the treaties are international law, and if there's no mechanism, unless you get unanimous agreement, you couldn't pull out either. But there is a trigger in the Lisbon Treaty, put into the Lisbon Treaty in the year 2007, I think. And this allowed it to happen. And to do this, we had to have a withdrawal treaty. And in that withdrawal treaty, we can see, what happens to the citizens, the European citizens living in the United Kingdom, how are they protected, the English people living in Europe, how they can protect, remember they're going to have all their rights withdrawn otherwise. What's going to happen to Northern Ireland, because Europe solved the Northern Irish conflict, the Northern Ireland problem, by giving a common identity to the Catholics and the Protestants. So they needed to really state what would happen in Northern Ireland to preserve this peace. They needed a border between Northern Ireland and England, because otherwise, if the border was in Ireland, it would be a European border between the north and the south. That would start the conflict again. So that had to be in. And then obviously there's the money. There was a lot of outstanding money owed by the United Kingdom to Europe that had to be paid for, just paying the bills. And then the United Kingdom can pull out of all the institutions and be freed of all of its obligations, but also its rights. Because we obviously gave up a lot of rights, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So we've got this integration process, the European Union. Now, how does the European Union affect our everyday life? That is, the most important question. What difference does it make to our lives? We can see this, the difference, when we look at Brexit and what has happened to the lives in the United Kingdom that are no longer under the European Union flag. And we see that, they don't have the freedom of movement. For example, the citizens, the United Kingdom citizens, need a visa now to visit other countries in Europe. The Italian citizens need a passport, not an identity card, to go to England. And also they need a visa, and often, not often, always they have to put their fingerprints. Sometimes they're arrested and put in detention because they haven't got the paperwork, etc., etc. There's a bit of friction. So there's this problem with freedom of movement. Before, it was very easy to go to England, to retire, to study, to work, to whatever. You you wanted to do, you could just go and do it. Now, for example, it's nearly impossible to come, for example, to come to Europe for an English person and to set up a business. They wouldn't have the same rights. Maybe their qualifications wouldn't be recognised. You know, if you're a lawyer or an architect or, you know, a teacher, whatever, before they must, the member nation state must recognise those qualifications. After Brexit, they're not recognised. You can no longer drive with your driving licence. With your British driving licence, you need an international driving licence. You can't go to the hospitals, the local hospitals. If you go somewhere like Italy from England and something goes wrong, you have to pay, or you have some form of insurance. Before Brexit, the British, if they came to Italy, they could vote in the local elections, and that means the local politicians would be thinking of their interests. Now they can't. They are just holiday makers, or they must go and get permission from the police to stay, and they're staying with permission of the Italian state. So there's a lot of things that, you know, affect our daily lives. Many students in Italy wanted to go to study in England, in the London universities are very good. They can't now. Before it was automatic, they're automatically entitled. Often they're automatically entitled also to a grant from the government. They're no longer entitled to that. There's a lot of friction with exports now from England and to England. So, for example, maybe you need veterinary certificates for certain foods, or maybe a lot of documentation, and often the foods don't get sent anymore because they take too long. Even if there's a tiny mistake in the documentation, they're sent back, etc. There can be tariffs on certain products. All the service industries, all the financial industry, insurance, etc. There's restrictions. So there's all these, problems when you come out of this European Union. This European Union was really for the citizens of Europe. We are European Union citizens now, to be able to share our resources in one community and have, when you're in a community, there are rights and obligations, but shared resources, and that is what the great benefits is to us and to our everyday life. We find the economy, the European economy now, is very developed, much more powerful than it would be. For example, in Ireland, many years ago, Ireland was quite a backward agricultural economy. Now it's very developed because of this membership of the European Union, because it's very easy for businesses to move where the labour's cheap. There's no restrictions. With economic union, there can be no restrictions on businesses and markets. There's total freedom movement of businesses, and all the rules are exactly the same. There's no restrictions, maybe in the past, some standards in Germany were very different from some standards in France, but now they're the same. So even the currency is the same in many European countries, and we can see you know, if a car is cheaper in France than it is in Italy, it's very easy to go to France and buy that car, maybe for 1,000 cheaper. If dentists are cheaper there, you go to a dentist in France, very easy. So it does make the market work more with less friction. How does the European Union affect the Italian nation? Now, for the main effect, we've got to go back to the fundamental reason of bringing the European Union into being. And that was for peace. The European Union was constructed by the people who had gone through war and with the reasoning of creating something that would stop wars. We think of the manifesto by Spinelli, written in his prison cell. It was, you know, the European Union was the blueprint of the European Union, explaining why it's so important to create this level of governance above our nation states, so we don't have this national egoism. When we have a place like the Parliament, the European Parliament, to resolve our controversies and our differences and create rules that are the same for everyone, there's no reason for conflict. The more diverse the cultures, the more possibilities there are for conflict, for differences of opinion, should we say. And so, but also, you know, there's also more possibilities of learning from each other because we're different. And by creating this space, the Parliament and the Commission, etc., where we can resolve these controversies and make it, you know, the solution equal for everyone. So, you know, it's not about who's strongest, but about creating the right rules according to the predominant philosophy in Europe, which could be left, right, green, non-green, whatever, and applied to everybody, all the European reality. So, but there are, I mean, it's not just about creating the space. Just by creating the European Union where we integrate as a community means we learn a lot about each other, maybe we marry and we create businesses together, etc. And there's less likely we're going to create distrust and, you know, hatreds and attack each other. Just this integration creates a more peaceful environment and opens our minds, you know. Suddenly, when we have a lot of collaboration with the Germans, we start to understand a different way of looking at the world and learn from that. And maybe we become more tolerant and open-minded and less likely to go to war. But there's also the very, very good protection that we have one judicial system where our courts are going to enforce the European law. Remember the treaties, the fundamental laws of Europe talk a lot about peace, and it's absolutely not legitimate to use any force of one member against another. So any act of war, we cannot declare war, first of all. And if we can't declare war, if Italian soldiers attack German soldiers, they will be treated just as acts of violence and criminal acts, penal acts, not acts of war or defending of the nation state, etc. So it does make it very, very difficult for a leader to rally the army. Remember, the army, in the army, or in the ranks in the army, they are responsible for their actions according to the Constitution. And without a declaration of war, which would be impossible against a European state, member state, they are responsible for acts of violence if they call for, they were just inciting acts of violence. So that's quite a fundamental thing. The European Union does for the Italian nation, create a peaceful environment where we can learn from each other and collaborate instead of compete and attack. Other things, just being part of a bloc of 500 million people means we can negotiate free trade agreements very good. We're in a good position. We can negotiate good terms. For example, with the Americans. The Americans are much more interested in getting a free trade agreement with us, and all the giving us good terms, than they would be with just a 60 million market of the United Kingdom. So maybe they'd offer the United Kingdom not such good terms. And also our influence, just our influence in the world. Basically, the European Union is fighting for values. If you drill down to what is really important to the Europeans, what it really is, it's values, it's what we value. We value democracy, we value solidarity, we value human rights, free markets, social market, minimum standard of living, etc., tolerance, peace. We are able to fight for those values in this globalized world. The world is globalizing, it's connecting, we're creating a global system. We need that global system really to contain our values, and together, by forming one community, by integrating, we're much louder. We're able to really push our values much more. So, there's lots of other. Just thinking, what does the European Union do to affect the Italian nation? Well, we can think of Northern Ireland. Before the European Union, Northern Ireland was at war with the British. And by sharing an identity, the Catholics and the Protestants, and getting rid of the border between the Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland, etc., it did create peace. So just things like that, it does mean that we can bring peoples together, different cultures together, and create an environment of peace. What is the European Union? The European Union is an organisation of nation states based on treaties. It was built on treaties, originally economic, then political, etc. But now it is recognised in the world. It's a place where these nation states share sovereignty. The sovereignty is shared in the European Parliament, for example, or the central bank. The central bank controls the economic policy, the monetary policy of Italy with 15 other countries. So we're sharing this sovereignty, but maybe the Parliament is sharing its sovereignty, the Italian Parliament, on trade with the rest of the world. So they decide that the European Parliament can decide, or the Commission normally negotiates for, on behalf of the Italian government, trade deals, etc. Maybe, we have cooperation on immigration. We're sharing sovereignty in terms of letting in all the Europeans into Italy without any restrictions. So it is a place where we share sovereignty. The European Union is, based on these treaties, it is these institutions like the Parliament and the Commission and the Court of Justice and the Council. It's just these. There's no hard infrastructure. There's no police force or army or hospital system. They're all national. They're all nationally owned. So it's really just a cooperation where it can decide where it would be best to cooperate, on what sovereignties would it be in the interests of everyone, and that must be a unanimous decision, and then create harmonised laws on those sovereignties. There's no punitive infrastructure. It can, if a member state doesn't respect the rules, it can go to the European Court, and the fine can be applied to the member state. But it's all according to treaties. There's no real hard power to the European Union.